Welcome to Podcast on the Brink, your weekly dose of Indiana basketball news and discussion, brought to you by the Assembly Call and Inside the Hall. I'm your host, Jerod Morris. Join me live at assemblycall.com every Thursday night and immediately following every IU game for our live IU postgame show. And visit InsideTheHall.com for complete coverage of IU basketball and to join the discussion in the Inside the Hall Premium Forum.
Here they come, and Indiana got to him. Sack.
Indiana football.
Oh, what a tremendous grab. Hoosiers are threatening at the 3-yard line.
Nothing beats game day in Bloomington, so get your Indiana football tickets now and be at family-friendly Memorial Stadium as the Hoosiers take on Rutgers for homecoming on October 12th. Adult tickets are as low as $30, and as always, youth tickets are just $10. Visit IUHoosiers.com for more information.
15 to 10 to 5, touchdown! How about that?
On this week's edition of Podcast on the Brink, Alex Bozich and I are joined by Rick Bozich to react to what we heard at Indiana's Media Day, both from the players and the coaches, and talk about how things are going this offseason and what Rick expects from the team and from some individual players coming up in this new season. We'll get to that here in just a second. Before we do, a quick word from this week's sponsor, SeatGeek. Do you ever feel like ticketing websites make getting to the event difficult on purpose? It's as if they're so big they can get away with not caring about the customer experience. So what if their site's annoying and doesn't have the events you want? The real question is, how easy could it be if those ticketing sites actually cared? Well, SeatGeek is a ticketing site that actually cares. And all you have to do is take a quick look at the App Store, and you will see over 50,000 five-star reviews. That's pretty indicative of customer satisfaction, I would say. And the reason why is because they deliver a better process. SeatGeek pulls together millions of tickets from all over the web. They rate each deal on a scale of 1 to 10, and they display them on an interactive seat map. They break down the details. Green dots mean good deals, red dots are overpriced, and every purchase is fully guaranteed, so you can shop for tickets with confidence. I have the SeatGeek app on my phone. It's by far the fastest and easiest way that I have ever found to find tickets. That's why I just used it to buy concert tickets, and that's why it's easy for me to recommend it, because I use it myself. And here's a great part, because saving money is always nice, right? Well, SeatGeek will give you $10 off your first SeatGeek purchase. All you need to do is use our promo code. So download the SeatGeek app today and use the promo code BRINK, BRINK, for $10 off your first purchase. That's promo code BRINK for $10 off your first purchase. All right, here's our conversation with Rick Bozich. All right, and we are joined this week on Podcast on the Brink by the great Rick Bozich. Rick, how are you? Thank you for taking the time to talk with us this week.
I'm ready for some hoops after going to Bloomington on Wednesday and listening to Archie Miller talk, and then listening to all the player interviews on Tuesday. It's a sign that the season is near, and it's time for basketball.
Yes, it is, and practice is starting soon, and Hoosier Hysteria is coming, and before we know it, there will be games, which has all of us excited. So let's talk about the Media Day festivities, which happened this week. You wrote a piece, 5 things that must go right for Indiana basketball, and you were up there, as you said, to hear Archie talk. What were some of your biggest takeaways from the Media Day session?
From yesterday, I think he was very out there, and very direct in saying that, they're going to probably go big. They're going to go with a center and probably Trace Jackson at power forward. And as I wrote in the piece, that's kind of against the grain in college basketball and pro basketball. Teams are usually going smaller, not as interested in throwing the ball inside, a little bit more interested in a perimeter game. And he mentioned that the downside of that would be your power forward has to be able to guard somebody who can play out on the perimeter, and they think Trace Jackson Davis is athletic enough to do that. But when I look at Indiana's available talent, until Jerome Hunter proves that he's able to play, I think that's probably the best approach they can have.
Well, and you mentioned Jerome, and that was obviously the big headline from, the player availability session. I don't know that we necessarily learned anything new, but it was nice to see reiterated that he has been active, hasn't had any, restrictions, and obviously they're going to continue to take precautions with him. But what do you kind of take away from that? And does what we learned change at all your expectations for what we can expect from him? And what do you think are fair expectations for Jerome this year?
The thing with Jerome is he's like exactly what they need, in my opinion. I know they need several things, but a guy who can play on the wing and handle the ball and make threes and create his own shots and create plays for other people is something that they really haven't had maybe since Troy Williams in that position. And I know I've heard from a variety of people how well he was playing a year ago before he was shut down. And if those things are true, I think he could eventually be, somebody who's the second or third leading scorer on the team and be an important guy. If everything goes well, he's got to stay healthy and shake the rust off. But I think it's unrealistic to expect him to come in and be a great player, even a very good player from the beginning, because A, he's got no experience at the college level, and B, he's coming back from sitting out a year. So that's a lot to ask.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the potentially scary things for Indiana fans when they listened to Archie yesterday, when he said that there's no question that Devonte Green is the most talented offensive player. And so far through 3 years, we've seen flashes of Devonte Green being a good player, but we've also seen long stretches of play of inconsistency. What do you think are fair expectations for him entering this season? And can Indiana actually be an NCAA tournament team if Devonte Green is indeed their best offensive player?
Yeah, I think they can be an NCAA tournament team if he's their best offensive player, because he showed, during the last 7-game stretch that they could win games with him. You just have to go into it looking at him for who the body of work says that he is. He's a guy who can make difficult shots. He can get really hot. He can carry a team during a stretch, but unless he's changed, and my belief is he hasn't changed that much, he's going to have plays where he's careless with the ball, or he takes a shot that he shouldn't take because it's contested, or it's too deep, or it's too quick in the shot clock, or somebody else is open. And hopefully there's some growth there. But I think he can be a winning player. I do.
When you look at some of these preseason expectations, we were talking about this before we started recording, but I believe, if I have this straight, Athlon Sports picked Indiana 9th in the Big Ten. Lindy's and Blue Ribbon have picked them 10th, and Street and Smith, I think, picked them 11th. And I look at the Big Ten right now, top to bottom. Besides Michigan State, Maryland, Ohio State, I'm not confident that anybody else is a surefire NCAA tournament team. I guess, what do you think of these expectations right now? Are they fair for Indiana? Do you think there's what kind of chance do they have to kind of outperform the expectations? I know you contributed to the Athlon prediction, so just kind of what was your reaction when you see all of those predictions, and kind of why did you go with Indiana 9th? I believe in the preseason.
Right, I did do the Athlon prediction. I did have them 9th. I'd say put them all in pencil. Because Indiana is a hard team to forecast, because they lost, obviously, Langford and Morgan. And while they were really good players, there's times I look back at them and say that they also did some things that at times didn't help the team win. When the number that always jumps out at me is they took so many 3-point shots and shot them so poorly. And maybe this year's team, if they can not have that element and have guys actually taking 3-point shots who are making them, they can improve in that level. And I think that last year was such the mojo was just bad. I mean, guys were injured almost all year long, and then they started losing those games, and the negativity just built. And that was a better team than the record. I mean, we were talking about it yesterday with a few people. If Jerron Davis makes that tip in at Arkansas, they're in the NCAA tournament, and the vibe's different. If the Purdue guy, I forgot who was it, Harms, made the shot. Yeah, he makes that shot. The Ohio State guy threw that tough shot in. There's three or none of those things went their way. If one of those things go their way, they're in the NCAA tournament, and sort of the discussion we're having is a little bit different. And the other thing I'd say is I think some people are over-evaluating a few teams in the Big Ten who have bigger questions than Indiana has. So you look at Michigan, for them to be without the 3 guys they lost and John D-line with Juwan Howard, who's never been a head coach at any level and is now moving to college basketball. There's going to be adjustment. And plus they lost that dude who was the defensive coordinator, and their calling card was defense the last 2 years. So I think Michigan takes a step back. Matt Painter's a great coach. He deserves the benefit of the doubt, but losing not only Carson Edwards and Matt Klein, but the guys they've lost over the last 2 seasons, I mean, they've got some questions to answer. Iowa with the unavailability of Jordan Bohannon. So to me, the season will depend on, injuries. We saw that last year, which teams stay healthy, which teams don't, and sort of, how guys who are unproven, which every team has, progress. If Indiana gets natural progression from Finney and I'd say, healthy Jerron Davis and Brunk comes in and, they got some guys who could step forward. And I'd say their ceiling would probably be like a 5th place finish and their floor would probably be like an 11th.
So let's say that Indiana is able to get up to that ceiling and get to that 5th place ceiling of maybe the guys that you just mentioned or someone that you haven't mentioned yet. Who do you think are the real keys, like the real X factors that if they maybe don't even just take their natural progression, but even, go a little bit further than maybe what people are projecting right now, they can have the biggest impact?
I'd have to start with Finney because I think that point guard is such a critical position. And the way he played earlier in the year when, against everybody talks about the Marquette game when he not only was good offensively, but he was good defensively against Marcus Howard. He makes the big shot against Butler, and then he gets hurt, and it took him a long time to come back. But in the game they won against Michigan State, everybody talks about that game, and he was inconsistent, as a lot of freshmen are. But if he can obviously increase his assist-turnover ratio, become a little bit better outside shooter, and stay on the floor for 30 minutes a game, that's number one. Number two, I'd say getting a productive, consistent performance from the Brunk-Jerron Davis combo. I mean, Jerron Davis has really never had a full year at peak performance at IU because of injuries and not being in shape and not being utilized. And we've heard the stories that he is in better shape now, but between him and Brunk, you should be able to have one or two of those guys out there at any time. And in the league where you've got, Wesson and Teskey and some of the dudes at Michigan State, I think you need to have, in the Big Ten especially, you need to have a center that has a little bit of a presence, and those two guys give Indiana a chance to have that. So those would be my two.
Reading through the comments that Archie made, one that really jumped out to me was when he talked about communication. And we heard a lot last year, and you could just see it on the court, that the communication between the players, the chemistry didn't seem very good. And he talked about how, that was a function of having 6 newcomers. And this year with only 3 newcomers, guys who have been around, having one of those newcomers be Joey Brunk, who is, a guy, he even said he's comfortable communicating. He can be kind of a loud, emotional guy. Sometimes we talk about these narratives in the off season and they feel kind of nebulous and you're not sure how much they can really impact things. But I actually do feel like this is something that could have a big impact on the court. So when Archie talks about communication and this team, having players who have now been around each other longer, more comfortable in the system, having a more vocal guy like Brunk, how much do you think that overall is going to impact wins and losses on the court this year?
I think it should help increase the positivity and the competitiveness from the team. I mean, one thing I've learned and picked up from John Calipari from his time at Kentucky, and I believe him, is that his best teams are player-driven teams. If a coach is always having to tell guys, to get back on defense or, block out or, don't let your guy, beat you into the paint. After a while, coaches get tired of doing that and players get tired. You got to have players who are, leading the charge at some level in the locker room and, on the court and different things. And I think that was a weakness of last year's team. You can't really sit back and say that I guess it was Juwan Morgan, but he wasn't, that really wasn't his personality. I don't think he was really a leader. So I think that Brunk and Finney, to me, again, going back to those two guys, seem to be the guys most likely to fill that role. And Archie made a point of saying yesterday at the availability that Finney has shown more of those kind of qualities this year. So I think that's a good sign.
One of the other things that Archie was asked about on Wednesday was the shooting and how they're going to. I think you asked the question how they're going to improve the shooting from last year, and I think you touched on one thing earlier. It could be as simple as having the right guys take the shots. Last year it was a lot Juwan Morgan and a lot of Romeo Langford taking threes, but looking at how bad Indiana was just in general 3-point shooting last year, I know we talked about this yesterday. I tracked for most of the Big Ten season. At one point, they were on pace to be the worst in-conference Big Ten 3-point shooting team in the Ken Palm era. They narrowly escaped that. But is there a reason to believe? I mean, is there anything that Archie said yesterday that makes you think that they can be significantly better as a 3-point shooting team? Or is this really going to have to be a team that puts Trayce Jackson-Davis and Joey Brunk or Deron Davis in the lineup and kind of pounds the ball inside and tries to win the old school way that we saw many years ago in the Big Ten?
Yeah, I kind of thought his answer to what I asked was a little bit vague. He didn't really give a bunch of specifics other than say, practice shooting and take better shots. And, those are important things, but it's got to be more than that. But I think
maybe they didn't practice shooting last year because that would actually explain some things.
I mean, to me, if you look at it, I mean, it's really as simple as like telling guy, you're allowed to shoot these shots and I don't want you shooting them. I mean, and I'm not going to name any players. We all know who they are, but there's some guys who shouldn't be taking that many 3-point shots. And I think their best, the line's going back this year, so it's going to be even harder, you would think, for them to improve their percentage. Hopefully for them, it'll be harder for other teams to make threes too. But I think the number one thing they can do is the thing that they're doing is being a more inside-oriented game, which goes against the grain these days in college basketball. We're seeing more and more threes and teams going small and embracing that style of play. And that doesn't seem to be what Archie either wants to do or thinks he has the personnel to do. So my thing would be, the guys who you think can make them when they're good shots. And if they're taking shots that are bad shots, then you're out of the game and have a discussion and say, you go back in, but don't do that anymore. So we'll see that. I thought last year, there were just so many times last year, and I guess they had to do it because nobody else would score, but Juwan Morgan, in my opinion, took way too many 3-point shots. I mean, I know people were saying that, he needed to do some of that to show his versatility for the NBA. But I mean, he didn't. It didn't help him with the NBA, and it certainly didn't help Indiana. And the ones they took last year, like 1 or 2 passes into a possession early in the shot clock, are like that's like a turnover. I mean, that's a turnover is what it is.
One of the other interesting things to me, I think, based on what Archie said yesterday, I kind of got the vibe that, they're obviously going to play Trayce Jackson-Davis quite a bit. I don't know if he'll start or come off the bench, but one guy that Archie's talked a lot about in the preseason in terms of just being important from a defensive perspective, but I have a feeling that I'm just kind of unsure of his role this season. If Jerome Hunter's healthy and Trayce Jackson-Davis is as good as we expect, what do you make of Justin Smith? He had 2 great games last year against Michigan State. He had that dunk against Louisville that everyone liked to replay. But beyond that, there was just so much inconsistency. Is he a guy that you feel like can figure it out in his 3rd season? Or is he a guy who, if he doesn't, kind of improve, at least offensively, you could see losing time to guys like Jerome Hunter and Trayce Jackson-Davis?
Yeah, I think when you listen to the entirety of what Archie said, the one thing that he said about Justin Smith that stood out was he basically said he was maybe their best defensive player. He really did. I think he talked about him defending at an elite level and knowing how much he values defense. I'd say that Justin Smith will be a guy who plays at the 3 and at the 4. But to me, the biggest gain that Justin Smith has to make is if you look at his numbers, he doesn't get any assists, very few assists. So whenever he handles the ball, usually good things don't happen. He's not great driving. He has a high number of turnovers, and he doesn't help anybody else get a good shot. So that's the number one area of his game he has to improve. And he's not a great 3-point shooter either. He's He's good at making that dive in the baseline and have somebody throw the ball to him for a dunk. He can be really good at offensive rebounding. There were games he did make some shots, and maybe he's improved his mid-range game, but defense, rebounding, if he can defend and rebound, then he can stay on the floor and not turn it over. And that his ball, that's why I think that's why Hunter's so important. If Hunter can be a guy who can play in that spot, who can actually do things with the basketball, create, plays for himself and other people, that's a big upgrade. That's the way I view it.
I want to go back to Devonte Green, who we talked about earlier, because so much has been talked about him this offseason, and rightfully so. I have to think that if you went back 3 years ago when Archie took the job, if you had told him, hey, heading into your third season, you will not have made an NCAA tournament and you're going to have to build your offense around Devonte Green, I'm not sure what his reaction would have been to that. I can't imagine that's what he foresaw. But when you look at what's happened, when you look at the roster this year, I think it's what you have to do because, Alex, you mentioned, it is kind of scary to think that Devonte is our most talented offensive player, but he is, and he's shown flashes of it. We've seen it despite the inconsistencies. My hypothesis has been, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, Rick, my hypothesis has been that, for 3 years, Devonte has kind of entered each season not really knowing what his role would be or expecting it to be one thing and it changing. Like last year, where we kind of thought maybe he's going to be the point guard, he'll be a starter, he loses his job, he gets injured, his role's up and down, he's inconsistent. Not until the end of the year, when it feels like things solidified a little bit, did it feel like he really had the confidence to kind of unleash and play a little bit more consistently. And so, to me, one of the reasons for hope is that he enters this season clearly as that go-to guy offensively. It doesn't really seem like there's any way that's going to change. And it really feels like Archie is setting this offense up to put him in a position to succeed with how much he's talked about moving Al Durham to the point guard so that essentially, whether Rob Finney's on the court or not, Devonte is your two guard. He's there to score points, be a secondary creator, not be the guy with the primary responsibility of creating for others. That, to me, seems like, given the evidence we have of him, the role that he can thrive in. Do you buy that as a reason for why we can have some hope and some optimism for Devonte this season? Or, again, do you think that that's one of those offseason narratives that we talk ourselves into when, there's just not a whole lot of stuff to talk about and we're, just kind of projecting forward?
Yeah, after years of covering IU, Louisville, and Kentucky, we hear the stories every summer about the guy who's the most improved guy, and a small percentage of the time it actually comes true. So what he did or didn't do in the offseason doesn't really matter to me. I think what matters is that Archie has been public in sort of endorsing him, in supporting him, in praising him. Confidence has never been a problem for Devonte Green, but in terms of what he believes he can do, but confidence and believing that the coach wants him to be the guy would have to help him. They did a round of interviews, one-on-one interviews with TV stations from Louisville and Indianapolis on Tuesday, and they picked the three new guys and Devonte, so that's sending a message that they think he's going to be sort of the face of the program. They're taking him and Jerron Davis to Big Ten Media Day. That's sending another message. And, everybody sort of praised him from the way he finished last year. So all the tools that I think he needs mentally to be in a good place should be there. And everybody knows he has the ability to perform. So, yeah, I think it's set up for him to excel if he just needs to do it.
Does Indiana's lack of depth in the backcourt worry you at all? Obviously, you have Finney as the point guard. He'll be expected to play pretty much as many minutes as he can handle. We've talked about Devonte, and then you've got Al, and behind them, as a ball handler, you've really only got Armaan Franklin, who is going to be a freshman and is a guy who is highly regarded, but not necessarily expected to be an impact guy from day one, even though he'll get minutes. Is that enough to go into a long Big Ten season with in terms of ball handlers?
No, I agree. I think they're a little vulnerable there. Especially when you consider Finney had concussion issue last year. Green's had bruised thigh issues and different things, and Durham's had hand and wrist injuries, and they're all healthy now. But we all know that guys get banged up as the season goes along. So I think it'll be key, during that November stretch where they play all those home games against teams that they are projected to do well against, that Franklin plays and plays in the first half and plays when the games are still close to sort of get that kind of experience, because they're going to need him if anything goes wrong at all, and they're going to need him in the Big Ten.
I want to shift now to the Big Ten at large because I mentioned this earlier that besides Michigan State, for me, I'm higher I think than most on Ohio State and Maryland. I don't really feel confident in anyone else outside of those three teams. If I was to say which of these teams are going to make the tournament, I feel like those are three pretty good bets. Who else in the league? I know you mentioned Purdue and Michigan. Who do you feel like are some teams that can maybe outperform expectations, and which teams maybe that are being picked a little bit higher than what you think that they'll actually finish?
Other than Michigan State, Ohio State, and Maryland?
Maryland, yeah.
I always think Maryland's a candidate to underperform because Turgeon, to me, no longer gets the benefit of the doubt. His teams, he's had a lot of decent players, a lot of guys have gone to the NBA, and they've never really, I don't think they've ever overachieved, ever. So that's a very good question. Wisconsin's probably a little underrated, I think. Everybody's writing them off because of Ethan Happ, but they got most of the rest of their team back, and I think they'll get back to being more of a Wisconsin-type team. The only other team that I could think of would be Illinois. The games that I saw them last year, the big guy was impressive. I thought he played well in both games against Indiana. Now, I don't know how he played against everybody else, but he's got a chance to be one of the better big men in the league. They've got both starting guards back. Although they didn't win a ton of games, they seem to get better as the season improved, and they're getting picked a lot higher than they finished last year, so other people believe that. But, Northwestern's nothing. Minnesota's got some significant holes to fill. Iowa's tough to forecast because of Bohannon, and Tyler Cook's gone, right? And didn't they kick another guy off the team or suspended him recently?
I believe so.
Yeah, somebody got arrested, I think. One of their backup big guys, yeah.
Yeah, Nebraska's a whole new team. Michigan loses its top three guys and the best coach in the league who recruited all these guys to fit his system. Penn State, maybe, but Chambers has never done anything, so there's no really reason to go out on the limb with him. Rutgers, didn't their best player leave?
Omarui, yeah.
So that's the one thing I guess you could say that Indiana has in its favor is that the Big Ten, in my opinion, is as down as it's been in a long time. And plus, when you look at the recruiting rankings over the last 3 or 4 years, they're not getting many of the top 25 players in the country. They're going to the ACC and the SEC and the Big 12. It's not a league that's packed with a lot of NBA draft picks. Cassius Winston is a really good player, but I think in the really better days of the Big Ten, there's no way he's the preseason player of the year. He's a good college player. He might be a decent pro, but I don't see him as some guy who's going to be a lottery pick in the NBA. Do you?
Doesn't have the athletic ability.
Right.
No.
So
he's maybe a second round pick if things go well this season.
He's preseason. He's the consensus preseason player of the year in the Big Ten, and some people are picking him the national player of the year.
Yeah, that was one thing I wanted to ask you about. Just nationally, Michigan State being the preseason number one, and maybe my view of Michigan State is not as high as others because they lost twice to Indiana last year, and it was like the only team Indiana could beat for 2 months. This is the team now that's being picked to win the national championship and win the Big Ten. Is it a down year nationally in college basketball? With Michigan State kind of being looked at as the team to beat around the country?
Yeah, I think it is. I look around the country and everybody's picking Duke because everybody always picks Duke. Everybody's picking Carolina because they pick Carolina, Kentucky, and Louisville. But, I don't think nationally it's as great a year. And I think the Big Ten is without a doubt down. So, I don't know why. Maybe last year we had so much hype about the freshman class that not considered quite as good, but I don't think it looks like an elite year in college basketball. It looks like more of a balanced year.
Rick, you're obviously intimately familiar with Indiana, Kentucky, and Louisville. And, Indiana just had a fun series with Louisville, a 3-year series that ended. The Kentucky series, of course, famously, hasn't been played since 2011. Do you hear any scuttlebutt about potentially Indiana and Louisville resuming that series at any point, and anything about Indiana, Kentucky possibly changing moving forward?
I do not hear any scuttlebutt about Louisville and Indiana. I'd be surprised if that series resumed. And I really don't think that the IU Kentucky thing will ever resume until Calipari's finished at Kentucky. He's not going to come back to Assembly Hall. And I don't think Indiana's going to do a series unless it's 1 out of every 4 games in Assembly Hall. So that's a stalemate that won't end until he's not the coach of Kentucky anymore, in my opinion.
What are your personal thoughts on that? Like, from an Indiana perspective, if the only way that series can be played is if it's, if they're not on-campus games, if they play it in Indy and, Louisville or wherever they would play it, do you think that it should still be played that way? Do you think Indiana should hold out for on-campus games? Like, where do you kind of fall on that personally?
Yeah, I think they should hold out for on-campus games, and I think they should move on and not even discuss it with them anymore until Calipari's gone, and find somebody else to get a series with, whether it's North Carolina, Kansas, UCLA, those kind of programs. If you can find somebody like Arizona, I know he's talked about playing Arizona, get a home and home with those schools. I mean, Kentucky's MO is, that's not his deal, playing home and home series. He's got those 2 events, the preseason one that, this year has the top 4 teams in the country in Duke, Michigan State, Kansas, and Kentucky. And then there's this December event with Ohio State, UCLA, and North Carolina. That's Calipari's MO, and he's not interested in playing Indiana. And so Indiana should recognize that and say, okay, we're going to find somebody else and promote our own event, whether they play it 1 year in Indianapolis and 1 year at the Staples Center, or, find something else to promote their brand. I mean, quit worrying about Kentucky and promote your own brand.
Yeah. Last question for you that I'd love to get your perspective on. A lot's been made about the potential for players in the future to profit off their name, image, and likeness because of this ruling in California and the cascading effect that could have. Obviously, Mark Emmert was quoted, I think, yesterday, something along the lines of, this is like the biggest existential crisis that the NCAA has faced, which, I don't know, just sounded like kind of a ridiculous statement to me. What do you think about that, and what do you see kind of happening as far as that goes over the next few years?
The culture moves slowly. It definitely has always moved slowly in holding on to the concept of, amateurism in college sports. And I think it's inevitable that guys are going to be able to profit off that kind of stuff. And I think the NCAA needs to sit down and have a frank discussion about the way that they can do this and maintain some level of control, but find a way for guys to get paid in some way. Because it's you can, if you've just paid attention to the way the train's been moving over the last few years, it's moving, and him crying wolf like that is not going to help, and over exaggerating what a crisis it is. And I know that's complicated because you have Title IX implications and so many schools that are haves and have-nots, and even if you allow guys to get paid, monitoring, are they really getting value for what they're worth, or is that an opportunity for people to get paid even more than they are worth getting paid for, so they technically be, professional athletes? I don't know. It's very complicated, but to me, to continue to resist seems to be fruitless, because I think that's going to be a losing battle.
Yeah, the thing that's driving me nuts about the whole thing is Mark Emmert just acting like it's such a difficult thing to figure out. But if you look at any other business, and that's what college sports is a business, right? We figure out a way to pay the CEO or the president of the NCAA a salary, right? Because he's worth more. His job is basically to run the NCAA than you would somebody that just works in an office. So it would make sense, right, that if you're getting billions of dollars for a TV deal and Zion Williamson's being talked about on all these broadcasts, he's the reason why, NCAA tournament ratings were probably what they were, high last year. And it would make sense that he's worth more to the NCAA than, the eighth man on Duke's team. So it's almost like the old guard of the NCAA is just basically trying to kind of, and I said this before, they're just trying to kick the can down the road as long as they can before they actually have to do something. And I think it's going to get to the point where, we've already seen it with this. We've known that things have gone on in college basketball for so long, and now it's kind of coming to light with all the FBI stuff. But to me, it's always a reactive approach with anything the NCAA does. It's never a proactive approach, and to me, that's the most frustrating thing. Is somebody's making money off this stuff, and to me, if Duke didn't have Zion Williamson or the other 50 draft picks that they've had in the last however many years, they're not as valuable as part of a TV contract. So it makes sense to at least figure out something. I mean, I'm not saying that you have to go to a full-blown salary cap or, pay guys a salary, but at least let somebody, if a kid wants to sign 200 autographs and get paid $100 for, whatever it is. I mean, I just don't see the issue with it. And they're like, well, it opens up so many different things. Well, we've already got guys making deals under the table. At least kind of bring some of it above ground and at least try to monitor it better than what they're doing now. I just think it's just a very frustrating thing to see when you have such a great product for college basketball. And as somebody that loves the sport and likes to watch it, to be the constant target of ridicule from other people that cover other sports, I just don't understand why the NCAA wants to continue down the road that they're currently on. It'll never make sense to me.
First of all, change. Most people resist change, especially older people. And secondly, it's just college basketball's just got a different dynamic. And with 353 schools, the ability of different schools to pay is so tiered and staggered that it's really creates a very playing field that would be tremendously just not level at all at so many different levels. And you could argue it's that way right now. But yeah, I agree. I mean, you look around, having covered college basketball since the 70s, if you just look at the money that now is spent on support system, assistant athletic directors, sports information directors, dorms, training tables, training, all this other stuff. I mean, they have money, but they're spending it in all these different areas, and the players really aren't getting, what they're worth. They are getting something that's valuable and a chance to get an education, but they need to find a way to at least embrace this concept on some level and move forward. Because, as I said earlier, that's the way the culture's pushing it, and I think fans are okay with guys getting paid. That's one reason you haven't seen a tremendous amount of outrage about some of this scandal with Adidas and stuff, is that people just shrug their shoulders like they're not surprised these guys are getting paid.
Yeah. All right, last question, round table for the entire panel here. Which Chicago professional baseball team will win more games next season?
Ooh, I'll still go with the Cubs because they got more talented dudes, and I think they'll bring a new manager in, and they're more willing to spend in free agency to fix their problems until I actually see Reinsdorf do it. So I'll go with the Cubs.
Alex, do you want to chime in on that?
I'm going with the Cubs too until the White Sox invest in some pitching and quit. I mean, some of these guys that have started, like I watched a lot of games the first couple months of the season because I was somewhat enthused, but then I see some of these guys that are starting and giving up. Like last night or the night before, I think Carson Fulmer just got shelled in like the first inning, and it was like the game's over in the first inning. Spend some money on. I mean, they've got a really talented offense and a lot of good young positional players, but they gotta get some pitching. Otherwise, they're going to be kind of stuck in this middle ground, and I think that's the big challenge moving forward. So I'll go with the Cubs. I don't necessarily believe that the Cubs are going to be a playoff team next year, but I think they'll be better than the White Sox again.
We'll just bring back Burley. Let him eat up 200 innings. He could probably still get out there and do it.
I think he could probably be better than a lot of these guys right now. He could just roll off the couch and
ERA probably about
6 or 7.
4.5. Yeah, wouldn't strike many people out, but the game would be over an hour and 50 minutes, and get you 12 to 13 wins. It's Burley.
Yeah,
be more entertaining. Well, I'm going to go with the White Sox just to be different and unabashedly overly optimistic, I suppose. But you guys are probably right. Kind of need to see it until you believe it. All right. Well, Rick, thank you as always for coming and lending your insight. I think we all, hope the Hoosiers can outperform these 9th, 10th, 11th predictions, because it's not going to be a very fun season if they're kind of wallowing down there. But I think it has a chance to be a pretty entertaining one if some of these questions get answered in the affirmative and they can do a little bit better and compete for an NCAA tournament spot. That's what we're all hoping for. So,
yes, indeed. All right. Thanks, guys.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
Right. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Podcast on the Brink. We always appreciate you being here. Remember to join me and my co-hosts for more IU basketball talk at assemblycall.com and visit Alex over at insidethehall.com for complete coverage of Indiana basketball. If you want to support Podcast on the Brink, here is the single best way to do it. Tell anyone you know who loves IU hoops about us and suggest that they subscribe. Podcast on the Brink can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else podcasts are available. Tell your social media followers, email your friends, text your family members. For weekly discussion about IU basketball, they need to be subscribed to Podcast on the Brink. We'll talk to you next time. Go Hoosiers.